I've always thought there was something peaceful about the woods. The quiet, the smell of pine, the distant sound of wind moving through the trees like a low whisper. But sometimes that same silence feels wrong, too still. Like the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting for something. I used to go camping a lot, solo trips mostly. Just me, a tent, and the night sky. I always thought the worst thing that could happen out there was a raccoon stealing my food. But what happened one summer made me realize the woods can hide things. Things that watch you. This first story isn't something I tell often. I've never been able to explain it completely. But every time I close my eyes, I still hear the sound that started it all. It was late July when I drove up to Hollow Creek Forest, a quiet camping area about 2 hours from the nearest town. I'd been there before. It was remote but beautiful. Thick pine trees surrounded a narrow dirt trail that led to a small clearing near the water. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and started a small fire before dusk. The air smelled like smoke and wet moss. For a while, it was perfect. I even remember thinking how peaceful it was to be completely alone. But that peace didn't last long. As the sun dropped behind the trees, I started hearing something faint, a whisper. At first, I thought it was just wind moving through the branches. But it wasn't. It sounded deliberate, like a person's voice, too low to understand but too human to ignore. I turned off my lantern and listened. The whispering stopped. The forest went completely silent, not even crickets. And that's when I noticed something else, a second tent light. About 30 feet away through the trees, I froze. When I'd arrived, I was the only car in the lot. No one else should have been there. I called out, "Hey, anyone there?" But no answer came. The light flickered once, then went out completely. I waited a while, convincing myself it might have just been a reflection from my own campfire. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Around midnight, I decided to go to sleep. I zipped up my tent, turned off my flashlight, and tried to ignore the rustling sounds outside. Then I heard it again. The whispering. Closer this time. It sounded like someone was standing just outside the tent, speaking softly, but not to me. It was like they were whispering to the forest itself. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I wanted to unzip the tent and look, but something deep down told me not to. The voice stopped. And then I heard slow footsteps walking around my tent, dragging a little like whoever it was barefoot. I stayed frozen until dawn. When the first light hit the trees, I finally gathered the courage to get out. The woods were quiet again, normal. My camp looked untouched. Except for one thing, there were footprints in the dirt. Dozens of them, circling my tent like someone had walked around it over and over again in the night. The weirdest part? They weren't shoe prints. They looked like bare human feet, but smaller, almost child-sized, and too many to belong to just one person. I followed the prints for a few feet before they disappeared into the grass. That's when I saw it, about 20 yards away, the other tent. Only it wasn't really a tent anymore. It was torn to shreds, poles snapped, fabric hanging like rags. Inside there was nothing but an old metal lantern, still faintly warm. No sign of anyone. No sleeping bag, no supplies, just gone. I packed my gear in silence and got the hell out of there. On the way out, I passed a park ranger near the trailhead. He asked if I'd been camping near the creek, and when I said yes, his expression changed. He told me the site had been closed years ago, after a group of kids disappeared there during a storm. No bodies were ever found. Locals called it Whispering Pines. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and drove away. But later that night, when I stopped at a diner a few towns over, I realized something that still chills me to my core. When I grabbed my backpack from the back seat, the zipper was already open, and inside, sitting on top of my clothes, was a small pine cone I didn't pack, wrapped in a torn piece of red tent fabric. Even now, years later, I can't go near a forest without thinking about that night. Sometimes, when the wind's just right and the trees start to sway, I swear I can still hear that same soft whisper. And if I listen too long, it almost sounds like it's calling my name. That night in Hollow Creek changed the way I saw camping forever. But it wasn't the last time something tried to get close to me out there. The next experience was worse. I wasn't supposed to camp alone that weekend. My two friends, Ryan and Ben, bailed at the last minute after Ryan's car broke down. And I figured whatever, I'll still go. It was a small forest campground in Wyoming, about 3 miles off the main road. Nothing fancy, just a few dirt sites with picnic tables and fire rings. There was no ranger station, no cell signal, no lights. By sunset, I was the only person there. I built a small fire, set up my tent and sat down with a beer trying to enjoy the quiet. But the longer I sat there, the more it felt like the forest was watching me back. The sound of crackling wood was the only thing keeping me sane, until I saw the glow. It came from deeper in the woods, maybe 50 yards away, a faint orange light moving slightly. At first, I thought it might be another camper, maybe a late arrival. So I shouted out, "Hello? You guys setting up over there?" No response. The light went out. I waited a few seconds, and it came back, brighter this time. I could almost make out the shape of a small fire, and a person sitting beside it. But the light flickered too much to be sure. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't stop glancing in that direction. Something about it bothered me, because there hadn't been anyone else when I arrived. No car, no footsteps, no sound. Around midnight, I heard the crackle of a fire again, but this time it wasn't mine. It sounded close, too close. I stepped out of my tent and the air smelled like smoke and pine needles. My fire had died down completely, yet there was still that orange glow flickering through the trees. It looked closer now. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward it. Each step made the forest quieter. The insects stopped. Even the wind died down. When I reached the small clearing, I froze. The fire was burning low, but there was no one there. Just a small pile of ashes, a few half-burnt logs, and something else. On the ground was a photograph, black and white, water-damaged, edges curled. It was a picture of a man sitting by a fire. Same spot, same logs, same fire ring. But what made my stomach twist was the figure standing behind him in the photo, blurry, half hidden by the trees. I backed away slowly and almost tripped on something. A shoe, a man's hiking boot, old and torn, half buried in the dirt. I turned and walked back as fast as I could, but when I reached my tent, my own campfire was lit again, perfectly burning. I know for a fact I didn't light it. I hadn't even touched the matches since I left. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I did what any sane person would do. I got in my car, packed nothing, and drove straight out of there. I didn't stop until I saw headlights from the main road again. A few days later, I looked up the campground online. I wanted to report what I'd found, but the listing had been closed for years due to missing visitors and fire hazards. The photo I'd picked up, I still have it, and every time I look at it, the man in the picture looks a little bit closer to the camera. After that, I swore I'd never step foot in another forest again. But curiosity's a dangerous thing, because the last story, the one that still keeps me up, didn't happen deep in the woods. It happened right outside my tent, at a family campground. I never should have gone back to the woods. After everything that had happened in Hollow Creek and Lake Norwell, it felt foolish, even dangerous. But when a friend invited me for a weekend camping trip to Ravenwood Forest, I told myself it would be different. There would be people, laughter, and cell signals. A weekend where scary was just a word in a book, not something you could hear whispering in the trees. The drive up was long, winding along a mountain road that cut through dense pine. By the time we arrived, the sun was already low in the sky, painting everything in orange and purple shadows. The forest felt alive, but in a normal way. Birds calling, leaves rustling, the scent of wet earth after the afternoon rain. I laughed at my own nerves as we unpacked. My friend Lisa set up the tent while I gathered firewood. "See?" I said to myself. "It's just a forest. Nothing else exists out here." Night fell quickly. The first fire sparked to life, the flames crackling loudly against the quiet of the surrounding woods. We sat around it, roasting marshmallows, joking about every horror story we'd ever heard. I felt safer than I had in a long time, surrounded by people, laughing, thinking I was in control. That's when I noticed it, a faint light, far away, drifting between the trees. At first I thought it was a reflection from someone else's lantern on the other side of the clearing. But as I squinted, I realized the light was too steady, not flickering like a flame, not swaying like a flashlight beam. It was small, almost like a glowing orb, and it moved slowly, deliberately out closer toward us. I froze. Lisa noticed my stare. "What is it?" she whispered. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe it's just a deer's eyes or something reflecting the fire. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. We tried to ignore it. We told jokes, laughed, and even threw marshmallows toward the dark edges of the forest to distract ourselves. But I couldn't stop glancing toward the light. Every time I did, it seemed to be closer. Not fast, not like it was running, but closer, inching toward us through the trees as if it was aware. Eventually, Lisa suggested we go to bed. "Probably just some campers on the other side," she said. I nodded, but sleep didn't come easily. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made me sit up in my sleeping bag and stare at the tree line. Hours passed. Somewhere around midnight I heard it. A soft humming. Low, barely audible, almost melodic. Not human. Not like any animal I'd ever heard. I told myself I was imagining it. Wind maybe. Trees creaking. Something normal. But then, the humming stopped, and the light appeared directly behind our tent. I tried not to panic. I told Lisa it was probably a person with a flashlight, maybe a lost hiker. But she hadn't noticed anything. She was asleep, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing mocking me with its normalcy. I slipped out of the tent quietly, careful not to wake her. My flashlight felt useless. The beam barely reached the trees, and the glow I saw didn't reflect any light. It just hovered, just moved. It didn't make a sound, not even as it glided over the forest floor. It was like the shadows themselves were carrying it forward. And then I saw it, not fully, not clearly, but there was a figure behind the light. Tall, thin, shape vaguely human, but wrong. Limbs too long, movements too smooth. No face, just a darkness that swallowed the light behind it, bending the glow around it like water over rocks. My chest tightened. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I could feel the air press against me like the forest was holding me in place. The light moved closer, and I realized something worse than fear. It knew I could see it. It knew. I backed away slowly. Every step made my heart pound louder than my thoughts. I could hear the faint humming again, surrounding me now. No direction, no origin. It felt like it was in my head. I stumbled over a root and fell hard. My flashlight rolled out of my hand, flickering once before dying. Pitch black surrounded me. I scrambled to my feet, lunged back to the tent and zipped inside. Lisa woke instantly. "What's wrong?" she whispered. I opened my mouth to explain, but I couldn't. How do you explain that? Something that shouldn't exist. Something outside reality itself. All I could do was shake staring into the darkness beyond the tent flap. Morning came, slow and gray. The forest looked normal again. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. My mind ached, convincing me it had been a dream. But then I saw it. Small marks in the dirt. Tiny impressions like claws dragging across the ground, leading toward the lake and disappearing at the tree line. We packed up quickly and drove away. I refused to look back. Lisa asked what I was thinking about. I said nothing, pretending it was just sleep deprivation and overactive imagination. That night back home, I tried to sleep. I kept the lights on. Every shadow in my room seemed heavier, darker. And then I realized I could still hear it. The faint hum, almost under my bed, almost inside my head. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a forest spirit, a rare animal, some optical illusion. But every time I close my eyes, I remember the way that light moved between the trees. It didn't vanish, it didn't leave, it waited. And sometimes when the wind is just right and the forest whispers in the distance, I swear I can still hear that hum. And I know it's still out there. That was the last time I went camping. I can't explain what I saw. I can't even fully describe it. All I know is that there are things in the woods we aren't meant to see, and sometimes they watch when you think you're alone. If you ever hear a soft hum in the forest or see a light moving just between the trees, don't follow it. Don't try to understand it, just leave. Because some things once noticed never let go.